The Grand Convergence Hall stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal floor, its domed ceiling displaying the swirling galaxies beyond. Representatives from 47 civilizations filled the massive space, their various forms creating a tapestry of alien life. Some floated in containment fields, others stood on multiple legs, and a few existed as pure energy constrained by magnetic bottles. They had gathered for the 1,000-year convocation, a meeting that decided the fate of trillions across the spiral arm. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in the human delegation section, trying to ignore the weight of 1,000 eyes upon her. She had been Earth's ambassador for 3 years now, and in that time she had learned one painful truth. Humanity was a joke to the rest of the galaxy. The other species saw Earth as a backwater death world inhabited by violent primitives who had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. The current speaker was High Arbiter, Zalthos of the Krythonian Empire. His scales gleamed silver under the hall's lighting as he gestured with 4 arms toward the holographic display. The Krythonians had controlled a quarter of the galaxy for 10,000 years, and they never let anyone forget it. The territorial disputes in Sector 7 have been resolved, Zalthos announced, his voice carrying authority. The mining rights shall go to those who have proven themselves worthy through centuries of civilization. Sarah knew what that meant. Another resource-rich system would go to one of the elder races while younger species like humanity watched from the sidelines. She had prepared arguments, data showing human efficiency and innovation, but she already knew they would be dismissed. They always were. A commotion at the hall's entrance drew everyone's attention. The massive doors opened and a procession entered. The Seers of Velithos had arrived. Sarah felt her breath catch. She had never seen them in person before. The Seers were ancient even by galactic standards. Their civilization had mastered precognition long before most species had discovered fire. They were tall and thin, their skin seeming to shimmer between different states of matter. Their eyes glowed with an inner light that suggested they saw more than the present moment. The eldest Seer, Calvineth, moved to the center of the hall. His movements were slow and deliberate, each step carrying the weight of millennia. The gathered species fell silent. The Seers had served as advisors to the Galactic Council for 1,000 years, and their prophecies had never been wrong. Wars had been prevented, disasters avoided, and prosperity achieved through their guidance. "We have come to deliver our final prophecy," Calvineth said, his voice resonating through the hall without technological amplification. "For 1,000 years we have served this council. Now our time of speaking ends. We enter the long silence. But before we go, we must warn you of what we have seen." The hall remained perfectly still. Even the energy beings stopped their constant motion. Sarah leaned forward in her seat, her heart racing. Final prophecies were legendary events, spoken of in historical texts but rarely witnessed. Calvineth raised one long arm, pointing toward the human delegation. Sarah felt every eye in the hall turn to her section. Her stomach tightened. "Beware the children of Soul 3, the Seer said, his words heavy with certainty. "They are born of a death world forged in endless conflict. They know only struggle and survival. When their sky turns black, the galaxy will tremble. They are the storm that comes, the fire that cannot be quenched. Do not provoke them. Do not underestimate them. For when they will rise as one, and the stars themselves will bend before them." For a moment, absolute silence filled the hall. Sarah sat frozen, unsure whether to feel honored or terrified. Then someone laughed. It was a Krythonian officer in the military section. The laughter spread like a virus through the hall. Within seconds, hundreds of species were laughing, their various sounds creating a cacophony of mockery. High Arbiter Zalthos stepped forward, barely containing his own amusement. "Honored Seers, with all respect to your service, this seems beneath you. The humans? These primitives who only achieved spaceflight 2 centuries ago. The species that still fights wars among themselves. The ones who nearly destroyed their own planet multiple times before learning to cooperate." The holographic display shifted, showing images from Earth's history. Sarah wanted to look away but couldn't. There were clips from World War II, the mushroom clouds of nuclear weapons, pollution-choked cities, and endless footage of human-on-human violence. The gallery showed humanity at its worst, every mistake and atrocity displayed for the galaxy to judge. "These beings can barely govern one world," another voice called out, belonging to Ambassador Thriel of the Cassian Federation. "They have no psychic abilities, no natural armor, no biological advantages whatsoever. Their technology is derivative, based on reverse engineering from species who took pity on them. What threat could they possibly pose? A Krythonian admiral stood, his metals catching the light. Perhaps we should fear their cooking fires next, or their primitive projectile weapons. Surely those will conquer the galaxy. The hall erupted in fresh laughter. Sarah's hands clenched into fists under the table. She had dealt with condescension before, but this was different. This was her entire species being mocked in the grandest form in the galaxy. Part of her wanted to stand and defend humanity, to list their achievements and potential. But what could she say? Everything they mocked was true. Humanity had nearly destroyed itself. They were violent, short-lived, and technologically inferior. Seer Calveneth remained motionless throughout the mockery. His glowing eyes stayed fixed on Sarah, and she saw something in them that chilled her. It wasn't anger or disappointment. It was pity, not for humanity, but for those who left. "We have delivered our warning," Calveneth said quietly, though his voice somehow carried over the noise. "What you do with it is your choice. But know this. We have looked down the paths of time, seen the branches of possibility. In every timeline where humanity is pushed too far, the result is the same. The sky turns black and the galaxy is forever changed. Changed how?" Zalthos asked, still smiling. "Will they bore us to death with their emotional speeches about honor and courage? Will they inspire us with their clumsy attempts at diplomacy?" The seer turned to leave, his delegation following. Before he exited, he stopped and spoke one last time. "They will teach you why apex predators are dangerous. They will show you what it means to fight for survival against impossible odds. And they will remind you that sometimes the most primitive species survive precisely because they refuse to die gracefully." The seers left the hall. The laughter continued for several minutes after they were gone. Sarah sat in silence, her face burning with humiliation. She barely heard the rest of the proceedings. When the session ended, she walked back to the human embassy alone, ignoring the pitying or amused glances from other species. In her quarters, she found an encrypted message waiting on her private terminal. The source was unknown, but the message was brief. "Protocol Midnight stands ready. When they push, we push back." The seers understood, even if the others don't. Humanity doesn't start fights, but we finish them. Sarah stared at the message for a long time. She had heard rumors of Protocol Midnight, whispered conversations among military officials, but she had always dismissed them as paranoid contingency planning. Now alone in the embassy with the galaxy's laughter still ringing in her ears, she wondered if the seers had seen something real. Outside her window, the lights of Celestria Prime glittered like artificial stars. Somewhere out there, 47 civilizations were going about their business, secure in their superiority. And somewhere else, humanity prepared for a future the galaxy refused to take seriously. The seers had warned them. In 6 months, the galaxy would wish they had listened. 6 months had passed since the convocation, and the galaxy had forgotten the seers' warning. High Arbiter Zalthos had not. He saw the prophecy not as a warning but as a challenge. If the ancient seers believed humanity was dangerous, perhaps it was time to put that theory to rest. The Krythonian Empire had expanded for millennia without serious opposition. What harm could one small species do? The decision was made in the War Council chambers on Krython Prime. 3 neutral worlds near human space, rich in rare minerals, would be annexed. The humans would protest, of course. They always did. But protests were just words, and words meant nothing without the power to back them up. The annexation happened on a Tuesday, by Earth's calendar. Krythonian battlecruisers simply appeared in orbit around the 3 worlds, declared them property of the Empire, and dared anyone to object. The local populations, including several thousand human colonists, were given 48 hours to accept Krythonian rule or evacuate. Sarah Chen stood in the emergency session of the Galactic Council, her voice steady despite her rage. "This is an act of aggression against neutral territory. The Krythonian Empire has violated a dozen treaties and endangered thousands of lives. We demand immediate withdrawal and—" "You demand?" Zalthos interrupted, his forearms crossed. "Ambassador Chen, your species is in no position to demand anything. We have taken what we need. If you object, you are welcome to do something about it. But we both know you won't. Humanity talks about justice and rights, but you lack the strength to enforce either." The vote went as Sarah knew it would. 32 species abstained, claiming neutrality. 8 voted in favor of the annexation, seeing opportunity in the chaos. Only 7 species, mostly younger civilizations who remembered their own struggles, voted to condemn Krythonia. It wasn't enough. The law of the galaxy was simple. The strong took what they wanted, and the weak learned to accept it. Sarah sent urgent messages back to Earth. The response from the United Earth government came within hours. Do not escalate. We cannot win a war against the Krythonian Empire. We will file formal protests and seek diplomatic solutions. But Zalthos wasn't finished. He wanted to make a point, to show the entire galaxy what happened to species who took prophecies about their strength seriously. 2 weeks after the annexation, a Krythonian battle fleet entered the Sol system itself. Admiral Marcus Webb watched the sensors from the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's largest warship. 20 Krythonian vessels had just emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. They were moving toward Mars, where humanity's primary orbital platform housed 30,000 people. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Krythonian flagship," the communications officer said, her voice tight with tension. "Put it through," Webb ordered. He was 60 years old, his hair gray and his face carved with lines from 4 decades of military service. He had fought in the Unity Wars, the conflicts that had finally brought Earth's nations together. He knew war. He knew what was coming. Commander Threx appeared on the screen. The Krythonian officer looked almost bored. "Admiral Webb, your government has 48 hours to surrender all human colonies in the outer system. You will recognize Krythonian authority over your mining operations and submit to our oversight. If you refuse, we will demonstrate the consequences." "We're a sovereign species," Webb replied, keeping his voice level. "We have the right to—" "You have the right to nothing except what we grant you." Threx made a gesture and the transmission cut. Webb turned to his crew. "Get me the Secretary General now." The conversation lasted 3 minutes. The orders were clear: stand down. Do not engage. Earth couldn't afford a war. Webb stared at those orders for a long moment, then looked at his crew. Young faces, old faces, humans from every continent and colony. They all knew what those orders meant. "Sir?" his executive officer asked quietly. "What do we do?" Before Webb could answer, the sensors screamed. One of the Krythonian destroyers had fired on the Mars platform. The weapon was precise, surgical. It destroyed the platform's main reactor but left the habitation modules intact. Still, 372 people died in the blast and subsequent decompression. Webb watched the death count climb on his screen. He had seen people die before. He had ordered strikes that killed combatants. But this wasn't combat. This was murder, dressed up as a demonstration. "Admiral, the Krythonians are broadcasting," the communications officer said. "They're demanding our surrender again. They say if we don't respond in 1 hour, they'll target the moon colonies next. 200,000 people." Webb looked at his crew again. He saw the rage in their eyes, the same rage burning in his chest. But rage didn't win wars. Strategy did. Planning did. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was finding ways to win when victory seemed impossible. "Send a message to all human ships," Webb said slowly. "Civilian and military. Tell them it's time." "Time for what, sir?" his executive officer asked. "Time for Protocol Midnight." Webb pulled up his command terminal and entered a code he had memorized 20 years ago, hoping he would never need to use it. "Tell them the sky goes dark in 10 minutes. The executive officer's eyes widened. "Sir, are you sure? That protocol was meant as a last resort. If we activate it—" "They killed 300 of our people to make a point," Webb said quietly. "They're threatening 200,000 more. They think we're weak because we choose diplomacy. It's time to remind the galaxy why Earth's dominant species survived the dinosaurs, the ice ages, and each other." The order went out across every human channel, military and civilian. Response codes came flooding back. Factory ships acknowledged. Mining vessels acknowledged. Colony stations acknowledged. Even the small personal transports acknowledged. Every human in the system knew what Protocol Midnight meant. They had all trained for it, prepared for it, hoped they would never need it. Commander Threx watched his sensors with growing satisfaction. The human ships were going dark, their engines shutting down, their weapons powering off. The massive fleet that had postured so defiantly was surrendering without firing a single shot. It was almost disappointing. "Pathetic," Threx said to his bridge crew. "The Seers warned us about these creatures. They can't even muster the courage to fight back." Prepare to broadcast terms of surrender to Commander! The sensor operator's voice was sharp with alarm. I'm reading massive power buildups across the system. Every human vessel, sir. Their reactors are coming online at maximum capacity. What? Threx pulled up the tactical display. The operator was right. Every human ship that had gone dark was now lighting up like stars. But they weren't moving. They were just sitting there, power levels climbing beyond what their specifications should allow. Are they going to self-destruct? Someone asked. Don't be absurd, Threx said. They're trying to scare us. Ignore it and... The sky turned black. That was the only way Threx's mind could process what happened. One moment space was filled with stars. The next the stars were gone, blotted out by thousands of objects emerging from every direction. His sensors went insane trying to track them all. They came from the asteroid belt where they had been disguised as rocks for years. They came from orbital debris fields where they had waited in cold silence. They came from behind the moon, from the polar ice caps of Mars, from beneath the clouds of Jupiter. Everywhere Threx looked, ships were appearing. Not hundreds, thousands, how? Threx whispered. Where did they all come from? His tactical officer's voice shook as he answered. Sir, every piece of space debris we cataloged in this system, half of them weren't debris. They were dormant vessels. The humans have been building and hiding ships for decades. The human fleet hadn't surrendered. They had simply gone dark to activate Protocol Midnight. Now, as Threx watched in horror, those thousands of ships began to move. They didn't charge in a glorious formation like proper military vessels. They scattered, moving in unpredictable patterns using tactics Threx had never seen before. Admiral Webb's voice came across all channels, calm and cold. Commander Threx, you wanted a demonstration. Allow us to provide one. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. The human ships didn't fight like any civilized species. They used the terrain of space itself, hiding behind asteroids using debris as weapons, creating clouds of metal chaff to confuse sensors. They fired and moved, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted effectively. But worse than their tactics was their targeting. They didn't go after the Krythonian warships first. They went after the support vessels, the supply ships, the communication relays. Within 20 minutes, Threx's fleet was blind and isolated, cut off from reinforcements. Return fire, Threx ordered desperately. Destroy them. His ships tried. They fired their advanced weapons at the human vessels, but humans fought like they were underwater, like they were in jungles, like they were in trenches. They fought like a species that had spent 10,000 years finding new ways to kill each other, and had learned every lesson written in blood. A human frigate rammed one of his destroyers, its captain apparently willing to die to take out a larger ship. Threx watched in disbelief as the frigate's crew evacuated in the last seconds, their escape pods scattering like seeds on the wind. The destroyer broke apart. Debris spinning into the news of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy like wildfire. At first, many species refused to believe it. The Krythonians defeated by humans. It had to be propaganda or exaggeration. But then the evidence arrived. Sensor logs, battle recordings, and the testimony of Commander Threx himself. The impossible had happened. The primitives from Sol 3 had bloodied the nose of one of the galaxy's greatest empires. High Arbiter Zalthos stood in his private chambers on Krython Prime, watching the recordings for the 100th time. Each viewing made his rage grow hotter. The humans had humiliated his empire. They had revealed a level of preparation that suggested they had been planning for war from the moment they achieved faster-than-light travel. Every civilian vessel had been capable of military conversion. Every mining colony had hidden weapons. Every human, civilian, or soldier had received combat training. They've been preparing for war since the beginning, his military advisor said quietly. Every treaty they signed, every trade agreement, every diplomatic mission, it was all a cover while they built their true strength in secret. How did we miss it? Zalthos demanded.
How did our intelligence fail so completely?
Because we weren't looking, High Arbiter. We saw what we expected to see. A primitive species trying to catch up to the rest of the galaxy. We didn't realize they were catching up by turning every resource toward military preparation. Their civilian economy was always a war economy in disguise. Zalthos turned from the screen. Send a message to our allies. The humans have declared themselves a threat to galactic order. We need a coalition to put them back in their place. The response was enthusiastic. 12 species pledged their support, seeing the opportunity to gain favor with the Krythonian Empire, or simply wanting to ensure that no upstart species got ideas about challenging the established order. Within 2 weeks, a force of 300 warships from 13 different civilizations assembled at the edge of human space. Admiral Webb watched them gather. He stood on the bridge of a new flagship, the UES Resolution, built in the frantic months following the Battle of Sol. The shipyards around Earth and Mars worked day and night now, no longer hiding their purpose. Humanity's mask had fallen away. Now the galaxy would see them as they truly were. "They think 300 ships will be enough," Webb's executive officer said. "They still don't understand." "No," Webb agreed. "They don't. Send the signal. Full mobilization. Every human colony, every ship, every soldier. It's time to show them what we learned from 10,000 years of killing each other." The order went out across human space, and the response was immediate. This time humanity didn't hide. From Earth, Mars, the outer colonies, and the distant settlements on the edge of human territory, ships began to move. They numbered in the thousands, each one crewed by humans who had grown up on stories of survival against impossible odds. But numbers alone weren't what made humanity dangerous. It was how they fought. The Krythonian coalition learned this the hard way when they advanced into the Epsilon sector, where human colonies dotted 3 systems. The fleet commander, a Cassian named Admiral Thriel, expected resistance. He didn't expect what he found. The human colonies were empty, not evacuated. The buildings and infrastructure were intact, but there wasn't a single human to be found. Confused, Thriel ordered his forces to secure the installations. That's when the attacks began. Human ships appeared from nowhere, fired on the coalition vessels, and vanished before return fire could be organized. They used the planet's magnetic fields to hide their signatures. They emerged from gas giants where sensors couldn't track them. They attacked supply convoys light years behind the front lines, destroying fuel depots and ammunition stores. "They're fighting like insurgents," Thriel complained to his officers. "Where is their fleet? Where is their main force? They're attacking like cowards, hit and run, never committing to a real battle." His tactical officer, a younger Cassian with more imagination, said quietly, "Sir, perhaps this is a real battle. We're just fighting it wrong. They're using asymmetric warfare. It's what weaker forces do against stronger ones. But they're not weaker," Thriel snapped.
"They have thousands of ships."
"Yes, sir. But they're using strategies as if they're the weaker force. They're using every advantage they can find. The terrain, our supply lines, our communication delays. They're not trying to defeat us in open battle. They're trying to make it too expensive for us to continue." Thriel was beginning to understand, but understanding came too late. 2 weeks into the campaign, the coalition had lost a quarter of its supply ships and nearly 100 warships to human raids. They hadn't won a single engagement because the humans refused to fight on the coalition's terms. Then humanity revealed their next weapon: information warfare. Broadcasts began appearing on coalition ships, messages from humans directed at the soldiers and crew. They didn't threaten or boast. Instead, they asked questions. "Why are you fighting us? We didn't attack your worlds. We didn't threaten your people. The Krythonians provoked this war, and now they've asked you to fight it for them. How many of your people will die for Krythonian pride?" The messages were simple but effective. Coalition species began asking the same questions. Small ships began deserting, their crews deciding they hadn't signed up to be part of an aggressive war. Some species withdrew entirely, declaring neutrality. Sarah Chen watched the coalition crumble from her office on Earth. She had been recalled from her position as ambassador when the war began. Now she served as a liaison between the military and civilian government, helping coordinate the massive effort required to sustain a galaxy-wide conflict. "We're winning," the Secretary General told her during a private meeting. "The coalition is falling apart. Within a month we could force a complete withdrawal." "And then what?" Sarah asked. "We've proven we can defend ourselves, but we've also made enemies across the galaxy." "What happens when this is over?" "That depends on how we end it," the Secretary General said. "Admiral Webb wants to press the advantage, to take the fight to Krython Prime itself. He says it's the only way to ensure they never threaten us again." Sarah felt cold. "If we attack their homeworld, we become the aggressors. We become everything they said we were: violent, primitive, dangerous. Maybe we are all those things, The Secretary General said quietly. Maybe that's not wrong. Maybe the galaxy needs to fear us to leave us alone. Sarah thought about the Seers' prophecy. They had warned the galaxy about humanity, but they had also broken their silence to send one more message. She had received it 3 days ago, encoded and untraceable. You can win this war, children of Sol. But can you win the peace that follows? That is the real test. While the Coalition's resolve weakened, humanity demonstrated another aspect of their nature: adaptability. Human engineers began reverse engineering captured alien technology at an unprecedented pace. Weapons that should have taken decades to understand were integrated into human designs within weeks. Defensive systems were improved, ships were upgraded, and tactics were refined. How are they doing this? A Krythonian scientist asked, reviewing intelligence reports. Their scientists shouldn't be able to understand our technology this quickly. It took us centuries to develop these systems. The answer was simple but profound. Humanity had spent their entire history stealing, adapting, and improving technology from their enemies. Every war on Earth had seen weapons and tactics from one side copied and enhanced by the other. Humanity didn't invent much, but they excelled at taking what others created and making it better, faster, and more deadly. The Coalition began to fracture seriously when humanity played their final card. They didn't attack military targets. They targeted the economy. Human ships, fast and small, began raiding trade routes across the galaxy. Not human routes, but the trade between Coalition species. Merchant vessels were boarded, their cargoes confiscated, and their crews sent home with a message. Stop supporting this war, or your economy stops with it. Insurance rates for galactic shipping skyrocketed. Trade began to slow. Species that had joined the Coalition for glory or profit found themselves losing money instead. One by one, they began to reconsider. Admiral Webb stood before a holographic display showing the strategic situation. Red markers indicated Coalition forces. Blue markers showed human positions. 3 months ago, the red markers had surrounded human space. Now they were scattered, retreating, broken into isolated groups trying to link up with main forces that no longer existed. They're requesting a ceasefire, his communications officer reported. All Coalition species except the Krythonians. They want to negotiate, Webb nodded slowly. This was the moment he had been working toward. Humanity had proven they could fight. Now they needed to prove they could win without becoming the very thing they had fought against. Accept the ceasefire, Webb ordered, but tell them negotiations happen on our terms in our space. If they want peace, they come to us. The message went out. Across the galaxy, species who had thought humanity would be in the ceasefire held for 3 weeks before High Arbiter Zalthos made his decision. He would not accept peace on human terms. He would not acknowledge that his empire had been defeated by a species that couldn't even control its own world a century ago. If the Coalition had failed, he would find another way. Pride, as the Seers might have warned, was a poison that clouded judgment. Zalthos addressed his war council with fire in his voice. We will not bow to these primitives. If the other species lack the courage to continue, then we will show them what true strength looks like. I am authorizing the use of the Stellar Decimation Protocol. The room fell silent. The Stellar Decimation Protocol had been developed centuries ago but never used. It was a weapon designed to destroy entire star systems, turning suns unstable and wiping out everything within their gravitational pull. It was a weapon of genocide, outlawed by every galactic treaty. High Arbiter, one of his advisors, said carefully, using such a weapon would turn every species against us. The moral cost. There is no morality in survival, Zalthos interrupted. The humans have proven they cannot be allowed to exist. They are a threat to the galactic order. One system will be destroyed as a demonstration. If they do not surrender completely, we will destroy another, and another, until either they are gone or they submit. The target was chosen carefully. The Proxima colony, home to 2 million humans. It was far enough from Earth that humanity might sacrifice it to save their homeworld, but significant enough to prove Krython's resolve. The weapon was deployed in secret, a massive device transported by cloaked ships and placed in orbit around Proxima's star. But Krython had underestimated humanity's intelligence network. The humans had spent the ceasefire infiltrating Coalition communications, bribing officials, and extracting information. They knew about the weapon 3 days before it was activated, Admiral Webb received the report with a cold fury that his crew had learned to recognize. They're going to destroy an entire colony, 2 million people, including children. They're willing to commit genocide because we hurt their pride. What do we do, sir? His executive officer asked. We can't evacuate 2 million people in 3 days. No, Webb agreed. But we can make sure that if Proxima falls, the Krythonians pay a price they'll never forget. Get me a channel to every human ship in the fleet, and send a priority message to Dr. Chen. Tell her it's time to show the galaxy who we really are. Sarah Chen had been preparing for this moment since the war began. She had spent weeks compiling footage, data, and testimonies. Now, as she received Webb's message, she knew it was time to play humanity's final card in the court of public opinion. She began broadcasting across every galactic channel, using hacked relays and sympathetic species to ensure her message reached billions. The broadcast showed humanity's history in raw, unfiltered detail, but not the way the Krythonians had shown it at the convocation. This time, the context was included. The images showed the trenches of World War I, where humans fought for years in mud and blood over mere meters of ground. Sarah's voice narrated, "This is the Battle of Verdun. It lasted 10 months. 300,000 died. And when it ended, neither side had gained anything. Why did we fight? Because we had no choice. Every human who has ever lived has faced a simple truth: survive or die. And we chose survival." The footage shifted to World War II, to the nuclear bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yes, we created weapons that could destroy us. And yes, we used them, because the alternative was worse. We learned a terrible lesson here. Sometimes, to end suffering, you must first inflict it. We are not proud of these moments. We are haunted by them, but we survived. More images followed. The civil rights movements, the environmental disasters, the pandemics and famines. But also the recoveries, the rebuilding, the moments when humanity chose to be better. Every species in this galaxy evolved to survive, Sarah said. But humans evolved to win. Not because we're stronger or smarter, but because we refuse to quit, even when we should. Even when it would be easier to lie down and die. Then the footage changed. It showed the Battle of Sol, the desperate fight against the Krythonian fleet. But it also showed the aftermath. Human medics treating wounded Krythonians. Human engineers helping repair damaged coalition ships so their crews could go home safely. You called us primitive, Sarah said. You called us violent. And you were right. But you missed something important. We're also capable of mercy. We're capable of choosing peace when we have the power to destroy. Can your empire say the same? The final part of the broadcast showed the intelligence about the Stellar Decimation Protocol. Sarah didn't hold back. She showed the weapon specs, the target, and the orders from Zalthos himself. The Krythonian Empire is preparing to commit genocide, not against soldiers but against civilians, against children, because we defended ourselves, because we refused to be victims. Is this the galactic order you want to preserve? Is this the civilization you want to protect? The broadcast ended with a simple question. We've shown you who we are. Now you must decide who you are. Stand with us, stand aside, or stand with those who would murder millions for pride. Choose. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the galaxy, species that had remained neutral began to speak out against Krython. Even some of the Empire's allies began to distance themselves. Public opinion shifted dramatically. Humanity wasn't the threat, Krython was. But Zalthos had gone too far to turn back. The weapon was armed and ready. He gave the order to activate it, consequences be damned. The device began its work, destabilizing Proxima's star through quantum manipulation. Within 72 hours, the star would go supernova. Proxima Colony and everyone on it would be annihilated. Admiral Webb launched Operation Nightfall. Every human ship in the fleet moved simultaneously, targeting not Krythonian military assets but their infrastructure. Communication satellites were destroyed. Orbital platforms were captured. Supply depots were raided. Within 24 hours, the Krythonian Empire found itself under siege from within its own territory. But the main thrust of Nightfall was a desperate gambit. A strike force of 50 human ships, led by Webb himself, would penetrate Krythonian space and destroy the weapon before it could detonate Proxima's star. It was a suicide mission. The Krythonians had defended the system with everything they had. But Webb had volunteered, and 49 other crews had joined him without hesitation. "We're not just fighting for Proxima," Webb told his crew as they prepared to depart. "We're fighting to prove that humanity doesn't have to become monsters to defeat monsters. If we let that weapon fire, if we accept that genocide is a legitimate tactic, then we've lost something more important than the war. We've lost who we are." The strike force entered Krythonian space using stealth technology reverse-engineered from captured ships. They navigated through hostile territory for 3 days, fighting their way through patrols and defensive positions. 20 ships were lost before they reached the Proxima system. Webb's fleet arrived with less than 10 hours before the weapon would activate. The battle that followed was the most desperate of the war. Human ships fought with a fury, born of knowing that failure meant the death of 2 million of their own. They used every trick, every tactic, every advantage they could find. They rammed Krythonian ships when their weapons failed. They self-destructed to clear paths for other ships. They sacrificed themselves again and again to inch closer to the weapon. Commander Threx found himself commanding the defense, having been reassigned after his failure at Sol. He watched in horror as human ships kept coming, kept fighting, even as they were torn apart. "They're insane," he whispered. "We're killing them and they won't stop." His tactical officer who had survived Sol said quietly, "They will never stop, Commander. That's what we failed to understand. Humans don't calculate odds. They don't do rational cost-benefit analysis when survival is on the line. They just keep fighting until they win or they're all dead." Webb's flagship, badly damaged, made the final push. With his engines failing and his hull breached in a dozen places, he positioned his ship between the weapon and the system's sun. "All crew to escape pods," he ordered. "Someone has to destroy that weapon and my ship is already dead. Get out." That's an order. His crew evacuated, but Webb stayed behind. He armed every weapon his ship had left, every missile, every torpedo. He overloaded the reactor and set a collision course. As his ship accelerated toward the weapon, he opened a channel to all forces in the system, human and Krythonian. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb. I am a human being, from a world that has seen too much death. I have killed enemies in war, and I will carry that weight until I die. But I will not allow genocide. Not of my people and not of yours. Remember that a human gave his life to prove that mercy and strength aren't opposites. They're the same thing, seen from different angles." The flagship struck the weapon at relativistic speed. The explosion was visible across 3 systems. The weapon was destroyed, and with it, the threat to Proxima. Webb's sacrifice had saved 2 million lives. Across the galaxy, species watched the footage in silence. The humans had lost 30 ships and thousands of lives to save 1 colony. They had proven that their words about mercy weren't empty. Even in the face of genocide, they had chosen to be better. High Arbiter Zet, the peace talks were held on neutral ground, the ancient seer homeworld of Velithos. The Seers had emerged from their long silence specifically to host the negotiations, a gesture that surprised everyone. They had spoken their final prophecy, and should have retreated into meditation for centuries. Instead, they appeared at the negotiating table, silent observers bearing witness to the moment they had foreseen. Sarah Chen led the human delegation. She had been chosen not for her diplomatic experience, but for what she represented, humanity's voice of reason in a galaxy that had pushed them toward war. She sat across from the new Krythonian representatives, a council of 7 who had replaced Zalthos. Between them sat representatives from 40 other species, some who had fought alongside Krython, others who had stayed neutral, and a few who had quietly supported humanity. "We are here to discuss terms of peace," the lead Krythonian counselor began. His name was Velthar, and unlike Zalthos, he spoke with humility instead of arrogance. "The Krythonian Empire acknowledges that we provoked this conflict. We acknowledge the harm we caused. We are prepared to make restitution." Sarah listened but said nothing yet. She had spent the journey to Velithos reviewing classified files, understanding the full scope of what humanity had prepared. What she learned had kept her awake for 3 nights. Protocol Midnight hadn't been the full extent of human preparation. There was another protocol, one so secret that even most human leaders hadn't known about it until the war began. It was called the Black Sky Protocol, and it was humanity's ultimate contingency plan. If Earth faced extinction, if humanity was on the verge of being wiped out, the protocol would activate. Every human colony would become independent. Every ship would become a seed. Humanity would scatter across the galaxy like spores, impossible to track, impossible to eliminate. And each colony would carry with it the complete knowledge of human history, technology, and culture. But that wasn't the terrifying part. The terrifying part was that each colony would also carry the coordinates of every species that had participated in humanity's destruction. The Black Sky Protocol wasn't just about survival. It was about ensuring that if humanity fell, they would take their enemies with them. Not immediately, but over generations. It was revenge as a long game, engineered into humanity's survival strategy. Sarah had been horrified when she learned about it. But she also understood why it existed. Humanity had faced extinction dozens of times in their history. They had learned that survival meant being willing to do whatever was necessary, no matter how dark. Now, sitting at the negotiating table, she had to decide whether to reveal the protocol's existence. It would guarantee that no species would ever threaten humanity again, out of pure fear. But it would also confirm every terrible thing the galaxy believed about humans. Before we discuss terms, Sarah said, choosing her words carefully, I need to be honest with you about what you're negotiating with. She pulled up a holographic display, showing the strategic situation. Right now, humanity controls or can reach 300 systems. Our fleet numbers over 5,000 combat vessels, with more being built every day. We have reverse-engineered technology from every species we fought. In terms of raw military power, we could destroy any empire in this room. The representatives shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't how peace talks usually began. But that's not why you should fear us, Sarah continued. You should fear us because we've spent our entire history surviving extinction. We know how to endure. We know how to adapt. And most importantly, we know how to make sure that if we fall, we don't fall alone. She paused, looking at each representative in turn. There is a protocol, known to only a handful of human leaders. If Earth is ever destroyed, if humanity faces extinction, this protocol activates automatically. Every human colony becomes independent and hidden. Every ship becomes a carrier for human culture and knowledge. We scatter across the galaxy, impossible to find, impossible to eliminate, and we wait. For generations if necessary, until we're strong enough to take revenge on those who tried to destroy us. The room fell silent. Velthar's face had gone pale. You would condemn your own descendants to a life of hiding and warfare? We would give them a chance to live, Sarah corrected. That's what species do when survival is on the line. You asked us to negotiate peace, but you need to understand what you're making peace with. We're not a species that forgives and forgets. We're a species that survives and remembers. An ambassador from the Cassian Federation stood, his voice shaking. This is exactly what the Seers warned about. You're proving that humanity is too dangerous to exist among civilized species.
No, a new voice said.
Everyone turned to see Seer Calvineth standing at the edge of the room. The ancient being moved to the table, his presence commanding immediate silence. What Ambassador Chen is proving is that humanity understands the price of survival. Every species in this room has forgotten what it means to fight for existence. You have been comfortable for so long that you mistake mercy for weakness and preparation for aggression. Calvineth turned to Sarah. But the question before humanity now is this. Will you choose to be defined by your capacity for violence, or by your capacity to choose peace when you have the power to destroy?
Admiral Webb gave his life to prove that humans value mercy.
Will you honor his sacrifice, or will you prove that it was meaningless? Sarah felt the weight of that question. She looked around the room at the faces of species who had mocked humanity, underestimated them, and then tried to destroy them. She thought about the lives lost in the war, the 372 killed at Mars, the thousands who died in Admiral Webb's final mission. She thought about the Black Sky Protocol and the future it promised. Humanity as the galaxy's monster, feared and hated, always watching for the next threat. It would ensure survival, but at what cost? Would humanity's children inherit the stars, or would they inherit only war and paranoia? Here are humanity's terms, Sarah said finally. First, all species will formally recognize humanity's sovereignty over the Sol system and all our current colonies. No interference, no threats, no annexation attempts. Velthar nodded immediately. Agreed. Second, humanity gets a permanent seat on the Galactic Council with full voting rights and veto power. We will not be second-class citizens in this galaxy. Also agreed, Velthar said. Other representatives murmured their consent. though some looked unhappy about it. Third, the Krythonian Empire will pay restitution for the damages caused and the lives lost. Not as punishment, but as acknowledgement of the harm done. How much? Velthar asked. Sarah named a figure that made several representatives gasp. It was enormous but not crippling. Enough to matter, but not enough to destroy the Krythonian economy. We want justice, not revenge, she explained. And what of this Black Sky Protocol? The Cassian ambassador asked. Will you deactivate it as a gesture of good faith? Sarah smiled sadly. No, because it was never activated to begin with. Confusion rippled through the room. What? Velthar asked. The Black Sky Protocol exists, Sarah said. The plans are real and the preparations are in place. But it only activates if someone tries to exterminate humanity. As long as we're left in peace, it remains dormant. Think of it as insurance. You don't cancel your insurance just because you haven't had an accident. You keep it in case you need it. She leaned forward, her voice soft but clear. Here's what I'm offering you, peace. Real peace. Not the kind built on humanity being too weak to defend ourselves. Peace built on mutual respect and understanding. You respect our right to exist and defend ourselves. We respect yours. We trade, we talk, we disagree sometimes. But we don't go to war unless someone forces us to. And if someone does force you to war again, another ambassador asked. Then we fight, Sarah said simply. And we win, because that's what we do. But we'd rather not. War is expensive, destructive, and painful for everyone involved. We've had enough of it to last a lifetime. We want to build instead of destroy. We want to explore instead of conquer. We want to be part of the galactic community, not its enemy. Seer Calvineth spoke again, his voice carrying approval. This is wisdom. Humanity has learned the lesson we hoped they would. Strength without restraint is tyranny. Restraint without strength is vulnerability. But strength with restraint, that is civilization. The negotiations continued for 3 more days. Terms were finalized, agreements signed, and reparations scheduled. The Krythonian Empire formally apologized for starting the war and accepted responsibility for the deaths caused. Other species who had joined the coalition also made their peace, offering trade agreements and cultural exchanges as gestures of goodwill. On the final day, as the delegates prepared to depart, Velthar approached Sarah privately. May I ask you something, Ambassador? Of course. Did you mean what you said? About wanting peace? Or was it just negotiating strategy? Sarah thought about Admiral Webb, about the soldiers who had died defending humanity, about the civilians killed at Mars. Every word was true, she said. We've seen, and